I had a wonderful, kind friend whom I worked with for a few years at a large hospital in San Diego. She loved her job and came to work each night shift with a big smile, often dressed in pink scrubs with her hair in a high ponytail. She was a joy to be around. Sadly, she was diagnosed with leukemia and passed away 2 years later. About 6 months after she passed, I was walking down the hall of the hospital unit where we worked. It was sometime between 1 a.m. and 4 a.m., a time when I often walked the halls to get some exercise and stay awake. When my friend was alive, she would sometimes take a nap in an empty patient room during her lunch break. That night, as I passed by an unoccupied patient room, I suddenly realized that a woman was sitting on the hospital bed inside, wearing pink. It took me a second to register what I had just seen. But knowing there shouldn't be anyone in that room, I stopped and walked back to take another look. For the briefest moment I saw her, sitting on the edge of the hospital bed, pink scrubs, ponytail, big smile, looking as if to say, "Hey, just checking on you all. Hope the night is going smoothly." I called out her name, and then she was gone. I immediately started to cry and rushed to the nurse's station to tell my colleagues. They all believed it was her, and honestly, it made perfect sense. Of course she would show up at work. She loved it there. This experience was oddly reassuring, not just for me, but for my colleagues as well. We all knew how much she missed work in the 2 years she was sick and unable to be there. This was a happy haunting, one that cemented in my mind that there is another realm we just don't fully understand. I've had a lot of strange experiences, mostly when I was younger. I grew up in a late 1700s farmhouse, but I'll save those stories for another day. But this was the first involving my child. When my daughter was 3, my husband and I had just gotten the keys to our new, bigger apartment. Having moved from a place with a lot of issues, we were all super excited, especially about the bonus bedroom and the large, clean, dry basement for storage. The day we got the keys, we did a big walkthrough together. After exploring all the rooms upstairs, I excitedly suggested we check out the basement. I flicked on the light, and we all walked down the open staircase. "Isn't this so big and nice?" I said, gesturing to the large empty space. I looked over at my daughter, who was slowly scanning the room, looking all around. She then turned to me, looking so confused, and asked, "Who are all these people?" A chill ran through my entire body. My husband and I exchanged a what-the-hell glance, but we laughed it off nervously. "What do you mean? There's no one here." She didn't elaborate and quickly moved on. She had never said anything like that before, and hasn't since. Later, when my husband and I were debriefing the spooky toddler comment, he reminded me that when we initially toured the apartment, without our daughter, the landlord had casually said, "I don't do basements," and refused to go downstairs with us. At the time, I thought that was a little odd since she had lived in the house for years and raised her kids there. And it wasn't even a typical creepy basement. It was big and open. So naturally, for the next couple of years that we lived there, I assumed something terrible had happened down there, hated going downstairs, and thought about it way too much. Last weekend, my wife and I took our 2 sons, along with my oldest son's girlfriend, camping in the woods for the full weekend. We had a great time, but on the last night, I woke up with an overwhelming urge to check out our surroundings. I felt uneasy. When I got up, I noticed my sons weren't in their tents. I started walking, calling their names, and spotted them on a trail ahead. They told me they had also felt an urge to come outside. My wife and my son's girlfriend were still in the tents. We wandered a little further down the trail toward the water, which was about half a mile away. As we walked and talked, I suddenly heard a faint voice. My sons heard it too. As we got closer, we saw a young woman, maybe in her late teens or early 20s, sitting on the ground near the water. She looked disheveled, dirty, and was crying. I told my sons to wait while I approached her and asked if she was okay. She looked up at me, whispered something in a language I couldn't understand, and then, as if I had blinked, she was gone. My sons witnessed the entire thing. We were all shaken, unable to explain what had just happened. To be honest, I'm a skeptic, and even though I couldn't rationalize what I saw, I wasn't ready to call it paranormal. We left early the next morning and there was no sign that anyone else had been out there with us. Since then, I haven't been able to shake the experience. I've been having dreams about the girl ever since. 2 nights after we got back, the house felt freezing, even though the thermostat was set to 75. Everyone noticed it. Our dog started acting strangely jumpy, uneasy, and less friendly than usual. I brushed it off at first, not even considering that it could be connected to what we had seen. Then, a few nights later, my wife and I started hearing footsteps in the hallway. At first, we assumed it was the kids, so we didn't check. But the footsteps kept going up and down, over and over, until I finally got up to look. No one was there. The footsteps stopped for a few nights, but then started up again later that week. Then, on Saturday night, my son's girlfriend woke up screaming. She said she saw a young girl standing next to my son's side of the bed, just staring at him, before disappearing within seconds. Her description exactly matched the girl we had seen at the campsite. I've been Googling the area where we camped, but can't find anything that explains what we saw. I've been researching non-stop and have finally come to Reddit for advice. Has anyone else experienced something like this? I remember waking up one night, probably about an hour past midnight, though I'm not sure. It was dark outside. I had this strange feeling that something woke me up, but I couldn't figure out what. Then, a few seconds later, I heard knocking on the front door. It wouldn't stop. It just kept going. I stayed in bed, thinking it was just my uncle who had forgotten his keys. But then suddenly, the knocking stopped. The hallway in my house is directly across from the front door. Curious but uneasy, I left my room and peeked around the corner to look at the door. That's when I realized something chilling. The second door, our metal security gate that we always lock before bed, was closed. There was no way anyone could have knocked on the front door. That's when fear really set in. My uncle had passed away in our backyard 8 years ago. Shaken, I went back to my room, not expecting anything else to happen. But then, the knocking started again. This time, it truly terrified me. I didn't dare look. Something about it felt wrong, deeply unsettling. And then, just like before, it stopped. I couldn't stop thinking about something that had happened years earlier when we first moved into this house. I was about 9 years old, and my grandma had asked me to grab a bucket from the backyard. As I stepped outside, I saw a black figure walking. I was so scared that I couldn't move. I was frozen. That memory came rushing back the second the knocking started again. I never told anyone about that night. I was afraid people would think I was lying or just making up a story for fun. But I felt true terror in my bones. A week later, my sister told me that she had also heard knocking, this time at 3 a.m. She had the same thought I did and assumed it was our uncle. She went to the door, but the moment she got close, the knocking stopped. When she opened it, no one was there. Our house has always been unsettling. We constantly hear footsteps and knocking, but we've never taken it too seriously. I just hope that if something was knocking, it was the spirit of my uncle, and nothing else. I had such an odd experience last night and wondered if anyone had any insights. I woke up needing a wee, which happens every night. So as usual, I lay there for a while debating whether I could fall back asleep instead of getting up to go to the toilet. While I was lying there, I was thinking about what time I should go to the garden center in the morning and what I wanted to look at. So I was definitely awake and aware. I must have been lying there for quite a while. Anyway, when I finally decided to go to the bathroom, I noticed the door was shut, so I assumed my daughter was inside. I could hear movement. I knocked, and the moment I did, I experienced this nanosecond of something strange. Almost like a split-second lapse in consciousness, just a blank, slightly jarring moment that lasted less than a second. Then suddenly I realized the bathroom door was actually open a bit, not shut. I pushed it open, and no one was inside. I was so confused. It was such a bizarre feeling. I sat on the edge of the bath trying to process what had just happened, before heading back to bed. To add to the weirdness, last night at 7:14, I was sent a photo of my cat sleeping in my mixing bowl. I replied to the message, and the person who sent it messaged back, saying that I had replied before they had even sent the photo. I'm going to assume I haven't suddenly started time traveling, but what in the world was that? Additionally, if it's relevant, I had another bizarre moment a couple of years ago at Christchurch Mansion, a huge historic house that's now a museum. It was late in the day, dark and raining, and aside from my partner, there were only a couple of other visitors in the building. My partner was in another room looking at exhibits while I moved down a short corridor into an empty room. The house had been completely silent before I entered, but the moment I stepped inside, I heard the sounds of plates and cutlery clinking, laughter, and conversation, like I had just walked into a party. I remember immediately thinking, this is not normal. A few seconds later, my partner entered the room, and the noises stopped instantly. When I asked if she had heard anything, she said she hadn't. To make things even stranger, my mom once had a similar experience. When she was in her 20s, she was on an archaeological dig and woke up in her tent hearing the sounds of war outside, shouting, metal clashing, the chaos of battle. Of course, there was no war. She was in the middle of a quiet field. However, that field had been the site of an actual battlefield many years before, hence the dig. Thank you in advance for any insight.